Hi, and welcome back to Becca Babbles podcast. I'm your host, Becca. I'm a certified personal trainer, holistic health coach, and future chiropractor on my way to figuring out this thing we call life. Now, let's get babbling. Welcome back to Becca Babbles podcast. I'm your host, Becca, and this week we're talking about all things digestion. I don't know why I haven't thought about this, but I'm currently in my gut microbiome course for my nutrition masters, and I was like, why don't I just teach you guys everything that I learn each week? So this is going to be like a little series, I think, where it won't be every week, but you'll just see more consistent episodes about the digestive system and just like gut motility, gut microbiome, and how things affect that. I know I did an episode a long time ago about like your gut microbiome and digestion, and I just basically word vomited all of these things, and I feel like that was a really heavy, in-depth episode. So these few next episodes are gonna be a little bit more broken down and more precise. This episode is gonna be all about just a general overview of why you might be dealing with digestive issues. I'm going to give you some insights into how you can help support your digestive system at the end of this episode. But I wanted to give you some background into like the science. We won't get too nerdy, I promise. But the science into what is actually going on in your digestive system and why you should be supporting it in these ways. So let's jump right into it. So, a lot of people deal with digestive issues that they really don't understand, and I want to help you guys understand that. Whether that be constipation, diarrhea, bloating, or gas, gut issues aren't fun, and most people deal with some at some point. I know for me, before I started at Parker University, I had pretty good digestion, but then now with like schedules being irregular and like not being super consistent with certain things, my digestion has kind of taken a turn. Also, fair warning, if you're uncomfortable about talking about poop or digestion or any of those words or anything surrounding those words, I would forewarn you that this might not be the episode for you, but I'd also challenge you in saying that you should actually listen to this episode because your poop is important. When you poop is important, and being comfortable with that is important. So if you just got uncomfortable right now, let's push through. But I want to talk about two main things that are issues that you're probably dealing with when it comes to your digestion. And those two things are your gut microbiome and your gut motility. So what does that actually mean? Your gut microbiome is basically a community of millions of microorganisms that live inside your gut, whether that be bacteria, different pathogens, chemicals, things like that, hormones, they're all living inside your gut. And most of these microbes will help with digesting food, absorbing nutrients, and activating certain receptors and molecules that affect your body in other areas or just within your digestive system and helping you poop. The role of the gut microbiome, particularly, is going to help with breaking down your food, so things like carbohydrates, amino acids, fats, things like that. It's also going to help break down what are called xenobiotics. These are things like foreign substances. So, like, if you are taking a certain medication and there might be something within that drug that your body has to detox through, your gut microbiome is going to help break that down. Pesticides, industrial chemicals. We live in this day and age where there are industrial chemicals that we have to deal with so that like other things can happen. Your body can digest those if it has the proper digestive system and nutrients to handle that. But if it doesn't, then there can be some issues. Your gut microbes also help with breaking down micronutrients that you need to then process those drugs, pesticides, and chemicals. Now, your gut microbes don't just break things down, they also help with boosting energy, metabolism, immunity, and producing things like vitamins and short chain fatty acids, which we'll get into in a second because those are super important. They're also called SCFAs, which I think is really fun to say. And then it also helps with your intestinal lining health, because when your lining of your digestive tract isn't healthy, then there can be some things that can eat those particles can go through that gut lining and then can cause things like intolerances and stuff like that, which aren't necessarily fun. Now, interestingly, your stomach has the lowest amount of microbes due to its acidic environment. So a lot of people think that most of your absorption or digestion happens in your stomach, and there is some, but not a lot. Your stomach actually is more of like the gatekeeper to make sure that no diseases or pathogens get through, or that you have a risk of bacterial overgrowth. In the next couple of weeks, we'll talk about how PPIs can actually cause you to have decreased acid, and because a lot of people use that for having gastric reflux, and how that can actually put you at an increased risk for bacterial overgrowth. And this is because that acid in your stomach helps keep all the bad things out of your gut, because all what your gut really wants to do, which is like your small intestine and your large intestine, what it wants to do is to either form things or it wants to absorb things so that you can feel better and start doing some other stuff. Now, speaking of your small intestine, one of the key things that your small intestine does is creates vitamin K2. Now, there's two specific bacteria that help in the formation and production of vitamin K2. I am not going to put you through me trying to pronounce those things, but if you have any questions as far as which ones those are, you can always message me on Instagram at Becca Ann Wellness, or email me at beccababbles@gmail.com. But vitamin K2 helps with blood clotting. It also helps with lowering your cholesterol and reducing your risk for heart disease. So, it's pretty important. Another thing that your small intestine does is help with bile acid transformation. So your liver makes bile acid, which is then modified by your gut microbes into what is called secondary bile acid. And this helps with stopping micro growth that could inhibit your health. So if you've ever heard of C. diff before, that is a type of gram-negative bacteria that can cause some overgrowth and digestive issues if there is too much of it. Now, secondary bile acid can also help with maintaining your mucosal integrity. That is basically when you look at your digestive system, it starts from your mouth all the way to your butthole to where you poop out. Now, there are different layers of your digestive system, and that innermost layer is called your mucosal layer. So your mucosal layer is the thing that your food touches that entire time. And so you want that mucosal layer to be moist enough, or like soft enough, to let things pass through and not like scratch up your digestive system. But you also want it to be strong enough so nothing leaks through. And those bile acids help with that. Bile acids also help with absorbing fat-soluble vitamins. And like I said, it also helps with inhibiting any sort of pathogen growth. Now, your large intestine, surprisingly enough, when I was doing research on this and going through my class, I mostly just think of my large intestine as like basically the last thing that just absorbs the rest of the water that you don't need, and then just like forms your poop, and that's pretty much it, and whatever. But actually, that's where most of your SCFE production is created. And now SCFEs are created by when you eat starchy foods or like high fiber foods, so things like fruits, veggies, oats, those turn into short chain fatty acids like acetate, propionate, and butyrate. These skiffies help produce 70% of your colon's energy through ATP, which is really cool. And you use that energy later on to help with digestion. You help it with just you and your daily life. So that food that you're eating and you're absorbing is really important, because not only are you absorbing that nutrients from the food you're eating, but it also helps create these skiffies, which then helps create more energy later on. So that's how your gut microbiome plays a role in your digestion. Now, gut motility is a completely different thing. And it's basically a fancy way of saying how your digestive system moves food through your digestive tract. Now, your digestive tract has smooth muscle that contract at a rhythmic time. This is called peristalsis. Smooth muscle is different than your skeletal muscle. So like when you flex your bicep, that's your skeletal muscle that helps contract and helps you like move your body through space. Smooth muscle is a little bit different. It doesn't contract like your skeletal muscle, but it helps move things along and is typically within your, well, I guess skeletal muscle is in your body, but it's typically within organs. So things like your esophagus, which is like where your throat is, or your stomach, those areas have smooth muscle in them. And they contract more in a wave-like motion than they do like a shortening motion. And this basically just helps you move food through your digestive tract, because when your gut motility is too slow, that can cause an increased risks for overgrowths. But then when it's too fast, then you can have things like diarrhea, which isn't necessarily fun. Now, this your gut microbiome and your gut motility, they affect each other, and they're basically a pair together. They're affected by signaling molecules and hormones and all these different things, and all the gut bacteria that's in your gut microbiome. But then your gut microbiome is also affected by what's called your enteric nervous system. And your enteric nervous system is really cool. If you've ever heard of anyone saying like you need to be in the parasympathetic to digest your food, and how like it has its own separate nervous system, or it's its second brain. This is what people are talking about when they talk about the enteric nervous system, because you've got your central nervous system in your body, which is basically your brain and your spinal cord, and then you have your peripheral nervous system, which is all of the other nerves that come off of it. But they've also found that you have your enteric nervous system, which is your own digestive system's nervous system, which is connected to your central nervous system and plays a role in that, which is really cool. Now, there's two main plexi that play a role in the enteric nervous system. That's your submucosal plexus and your myenteric plexus. Your submucosal plexus helps manage any sort of hormones or mucus being secreted from your digestive tract, and it also helps absorb any nutrients that your body may need. Your myenteric plexus helps with controlling muscle contraction and helps that movement. So that peristalsis that we talked about earlier, that's what your myenteric plexus basically tells those muscles like, hey, wake up, we need to get moving either faster or we need to get moving a little bit slower. Now, this myenteric plexus and this submucosal plexus is stimulated by things that are produced by your gut microbiome. So you have these cells called your enterotrophic cells. These release serotonin. So that chemical that everyone talks about, that like feel good, calm hormone, it actually plays a role in your digestive system, because serotonin, which is stimulated by those skiffies, will then increase your gut motility, because it's going to tell that enteric or that myenteric plexus like, hey, we need to contract. Now, on the other hand, you have these cells called the L cells that release GLP-1, GLP-2, and PPY. Now, this is going to tell the myenteric plexus like, hey, we need to slow down. We need time to absorb nutrients, or there's like a backup. We need to slow down. We don't need things to like get going. Or maybe you don't have enough skiffies to then tell those L cells, like, or to tell those enteric trophic cells to get going. So those L cells are kicking on and there's too much of that GLP-1, GLP-2, and PPY being released. So then your bolus, which is basically when your body breaks down all of its food and it creates this little ball. When that bolus is created, it then gets stuck there. And then when that gets stuck there, things like fermentation can occur. So if you've ever like opened a thing of yogurt and then you ate a little bit of it and then you let it sit in there and then you started to like it started to grow some mold on there, that's fermentation at work. So that can happen inside of your digestive system because things aren't moving fast enough, and that can then cause increased inflammation, which can then lead to things like skin issues, can lead to things like constipation and stuff like that. So even if you're doing all the right things, like taking probiotics, eating healthy, if your gut motility is off, you can still feel miserable. So when you're eating food or mucus isn't being produced properly through your gut, this can lead to things like bacterial overgrowth. Now, the opposite thing can happen where your gut is moving too fast and it can be going through too quickly, and it's not allowing for that proper fermentation process because you want some fermentation occurring, but you just don't want too much to where there's bacterial overgrowth. Because if you don't have enough fermentation, that means you'll have less of those skiffies produced, and less skiffies mean less good gut bacteria that's in there to keep your gut microbiome balanced. So in this study that I had read in my class, we talked about the difference between IBS constipation and IBS diarrhea. There's a few others that it had talked about, but I kind of just want to focus on these in particular. So with people with IBS constipation, we need to target them to have an increase in those skiffies, an increase in serotonin production, and an increase in those bile acid production. This is because when people deal with constipation, typically it's because their gut motility is too slow, and we need to get things moving. We need to increase peristalsis, and we need to make their stool a little bit softer. We can do this by increasing the amount of fiber that's in their diet. But I'd also say, and this goes with people who are experiencing diarrhea and constipation, is we need to work on just calming down. I am one of those people who hate when people say like, hey, we need to chill and we need to take a breath, we need to decrease our stress and all those things. But I'm being for real. Before you sit down and eat a meal, take just 3 belly breaths. Just be like, okay, this is my time to rest. Whether that be you sit outside and you feel the sun and you're like, I can do that. Or whether you're inside and you're about to eat your meal, whether you pray or not, that's a great time to pray. If you don't pray, then just like be grateful for the food that you have that's in front of you and just slow down for a second. I promise whatever you're about to go back to will be there when you're done eating or when you're done breathing. And being more intentional about that will help your body start produce those digestive enzymes to help then break down your food, which will then make things like peristalsis and things like that a little bit easier for your body to do. So whether you're dealing with constipation or diarrhea, you like slow down. That's the first thing. The other thing I would say, if you're dealing with constipation, sometimes people with constipation deal with alternating constipation and diarrhea, but typically it's at a root of having constipation. Because what will happen is that constipation, like the poop will get stuck there, but then on the outsides of it, then you'll have like diarrhea going through. So if you're dealing with alternating, typically at the root, you're dealing with constipation. So I would just these things that I'm talking about, focus on those. They kind of flip-flop. They're typically most of these are typically the same things that I'm going to suggest, whether you have constipation or diarrhea, but maybe focus solely more on that constipation if you're struggling with alternating constipation and diarrhea. Anyways, We want to focus on stimulating that motility or stimulating the movement of your digestive system. So what we're going to do is we're going to decrease our stress, we're going to breathe, we're going to increase fibrous foods so that we can increase those skiffies, because those skiffies are then going to stimulate serotonin and stimulate those bile acids. You can do this by eating things like berries, avocados, oats, psyllium husk. I've been super interested in psyllium husk recently because I used to think oh, that's just some floofy supplement that people take, and it's just a band-aid for digestive issues. I've been digging into more about how it helps with bile flow, and a lot of people who deal with hormonal issues deal with a lack of bile flow, and psyllium husk helps with that. So if you're dealing with things like constipation, you're probably also you may be dealing with things like high estrogen, or you're not able to eliminate that estrogen as well. And so adding in something like psyllium husk slowly, please do it slowly and increase your water at the same time, may help with your digestion. Studies have also shown that eating 2 kiwis a day can help with mucus production and increased motility, just because of the fiber and the bacteria that is in the kiwi. So maybe try and eat a kiwi a day. Now, I will say you will have to eat the skin with it, and I know some people get weirded out by that. I think it's fine. It's not that weird of a texture. Just make sure you wash the outside and scrub it. And then just you could eat it as an apple, or you can chop it up still. And plus, I feel like it's a little bit easier to eat, because who wants to peel off that entire skin? Because then I feel like you waste half the kiwi. And that's $1 down the drain. So you're saving money and you're helping your digestive system at the same time when you eat the skin of the kiwi. So while you're increasing the fibrous foods, I also want you to focus on hydration. I know when I'm in clinic right now, it's been really hard to stay on track with my hydration. I used to be that person that would go through 3 of my water bottles a day, and I would just be oh, just put a straw in it and it's great, that's good to go. But now that I'm moving around with patients, and my water bottle's on the other side of the room, or maybe it's all the way in the student lounge, because we're not really supposed to have our water bottles in the clinic, it can be really hard to drink enough water. So I always try and make sure that I drink a lot of water in the morning. I will drink water throughout my workout, and then when I'm done with clinic, I will make sure to fill up my water bottle before I leave. And my drive home from school to clinic is about 30 to 40 minutes depending on traffic. So I'll just make sure to sip my water bottle as I'm sitting in traffic and bumper to bumper. So that's a great way to just start increasing your hydration when you're a super busy person and you're not sitting at home and not doing a lot of computer work, if that's the kind of situation that you're in. Another thing that's going to help with constipation is movement. Whether that be you go for a 5-minute walk right after you eat, or whether that be you do some yoga right after you eat as well. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing down dog and up dog and all those things, but just doing some light stretching or stuff like that will help your muscles, help with the digestion process, and your body start moving things through. Another thing that can help with this is abdominal massage. So if you've ever taken your hands and you're gonna go in a counterclockwise action, and you're gonna nope, I messed that up. Clockwise. You're gonna basically make a circle with your hands through your digestive system, and you're going to help move your poop basically through your digestive system. This may be really sensitive for people who are dealing with gut issues, so just light pressure and go in circles. You can do this right before bed, you can do this when you wake up. I wouldn't necessarily do it right as you get done eating, because I don't know if I would want to do that right if I get done eating, but if that works for you, whatever floats your boat is pretty much what I'll say. So that's for if you're dealing with constipation. Now, if you're dealing with diarrhea, this is a different situation. When you deal with diarrhea, you're dealing with a decreased amount of serotonin, or what you want to do is you want to decrease the amount of serotonin that you have, and you want to decrease the amount of tryptophan that you have. You're going to do this because, remember, serotonin is going to stimulate motility. And a lot of the times when people deal with diarrhea, their body is just way overstimulated and they need to slow down. Whether that be maybe they ate something that's putting their body in a stress response, or they themselves are already in a stress response. So going through some sort of elimination diet is really helpful, but sometimes, like I said, if you just slow down before meals, that might actually help and you wouldn't have to do this elimination thing, depending on the severity of diarrhea that you're dealing with. So what's going to help here is going on a low FODMAP diet or going on just a simple elimination diet for about 4 to 6 weeks, especially those foods that are high in fermentation, because this may cause increased stimulation, because when you have high fermented foods, that's going to increase the amount of SCFs, which is going to increase the amount of serotonin. So things like wheat, onion, garlic, beans, lactose, apples, sugar, alcohol, those are all high fermented foods. So remove those for a bit, kind of monitor where your stool is at. So there's something called the bar stool chart, where I think you want it between 3 and 4 is good poop. So where diarrhea is typically towards the 10 to the 9. You want, and then constipation is 1 and 2. You want it to be about a 3 to a 4. So monitor that. You can start adding in things like glutamate and adding in a probiotic. A probiotic would also be great for someone with constipation, but here with the diarrhea, we kind of want to balance out our gut microbiome. So adding in a probiotic would be helpful here, just to start help healing our gut lining. Because typically if you're dealing with diarrhea, it usually has to deal with some gut issues or some other underlying gut issues. Once you do that elimination for 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to slowly start reintroducing foods. This way we can tell what high fermented foods are causing us to have diarrhea. Or it may not even be high fermented foods. Maybe it might be something like eggs. I know I had a friend, which sadly, because eggs is basically the world's multivitamin or natural multivitamin. She was eating a lot of eggs, and then she found out that that was causing all of her diarrhea. So she needs to remove those eggs for a little bit. She needs to heal her gut lining and then slowly introduce those eggs back in, so then she can start eating eggs again. It's important when you're dealing with digestive issues not to just continuously just remove things forever. I know there can be a lot of fear when it comes to removing foods and then adding them back in. Your gut lining is one of the fastest linings or the fastest tissues to recover. You're constantly turning over cells in your digestive system. So it heals really fast, and that's what we're made to do. So don't be afraid once you did the removing the food for a little bit, let your system calm down a little bit, and adding in some supportive supplements to then start slowly adding in back those foods, because being on a limited list of foods to eat isn't fun, and you're not meant to live your whole life like that. So slowly start adding back in those foods, and then if you get diarrhea again, take it away for a little bit and let your body reset, and then slowly start adding them back in again. It's going to be a trial and error process here. So the goal here isn't to have a fast moving gut or a slow moving gut. It's to have a normal rhythm. And this is going to help balance and support a healthy microbiome, consistent digestion, and help prevent any inflammation or overgrowth. At the end of the day, your gut health isn't all about what you eat. It's about how your body processes and moves that food through. When you are supporting your body, you need to support both your gut motility and your microbiome. And that's when the real healing starts to happen. If you have any questions or anything you want to talk about, feel free to message me on Instagram at Becca Ann Wellness, or email me at beccababbles.podcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for you guys listening to the podcast today. Please add a 5-star rating or review. This helps other people listen to the podcast and get the information out there. But with all that being said, I can't wait to babble with you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Becca Babbles podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, the best thing that you can do is leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or any other listening platform of your choosing. If you want to learn more about me, you can do that by following me on Instagram at Becca and Wellness, or by checking out my blog, freebies, offers, and newsletter on my website at beccaandwellness.com. If you want to share the love of the podcast, you can do that by taking a screenshot and sharing it on social media and tagging me and the podcast at Becca and Wellness and using the hashtag Becca Babbles Podcast. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait to babble with you next time.